She had always believed that hard work would be enough. Every morning, she woke up before the sun came up, got dressed in her uniform, and took 2 buses just to reach the fancy downtown restaurant where she worked as a waitress. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. She served breakfast to lawyers, bankers, and business owners, people who barely looked at her unless they needed something else on the side. The place was elegant, with crystal glasses, white tablecloths, and soft music playing in the background, the kind of place where people talked about million-dollar deals over Eggs Benedict. She'd often glance at the grand piano in the corner when things slowed down, imagining what it would feel like to sit there and play instead of balancing trays and wiping spills. Music had been her first love. When she was younger, she used to dream of studying music in college, maybe even one day performing in concert halls. But life has a way of changing plans. After her mother got sick, she dropped out of school to work full-time. Her dreams went quiet, tucked away behind clocks and paychecks. Still, every now and then, she hummed old melodies under her breath while walking between tables. No one seemed to notice or care. That is, until he walked in. He was a regular, always sat by the window, always ordered the same steak, and always gave just enough of a tip to keep her from complaining. He had a smirk that never left his face, like he thought the whole world was a joke, and everyone in it was the punchline. He liked being loud, liked being seen, and for some reason lately, he'd taken an interest in her. One evening, after hearing her hum again, he made a comment. Something meant to sound playful, but it cut deeper than he knew. Then he pointed toward the piano. "Go on," he said, laughing with his friends. "Play us something." The manager, not wanting trouble, nodded. Her face burned, but she didn't want to lose her job, so with shaky hands and a racing heart, she stepped toward the shiny black piano in front of a room full of strangers. This was supposed to be humiliating. But what happened next changed everything. She sat down at the piano like she was walking into a memory. The seat was cold beneath her. Her fingers hovered over the keys like they were afraid to touch them. A few people chuckled, probably thinking it was all just a joke. That rich man leaned back in his chair, smirking like he had already won. At first, the notes were soft and shaky. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, some mocking. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might drown out the music. But then, something changed. Her right hand moved on its own, finding the rhythm of an old gospel tune she used to play as a kid in church. The kind of song that doesn't just come from practice, but from deep inside. The room started to quiet down. One by one, conversations stopped. People turned their heads, drawn in by the sound. The melody grew stronger, bolder, like it had been waiting years to be played again. She closed her eyes and let the music take over. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was her voice when no one listened. It was every time she'd been ignored, looked down on, or made to feel small. And now, she was filling the whole room with who she really was. The smile on that man's face slowly faded. He didn't laugh anymore. His friends didn't either. They weren't hearing just notes. They were hearing pain, pride, and power, something bigger than any of them. By now, the other waiters had stopped moving. Even the kitchen crew peeked through the window to see what was happening. A few guests wiped tears from their eyes without saying a word. She kept playing. Not for them. Not even for him. She played for herself. For the girl who once dreamed of more, before life told her those dreams didn't matter. And in that moment, in that fancy restaurant full of people who never really saw her before, she finally felt seen. The music didn't stop. It grew deeper, more powerful. Her fingers now flew across the keys like they had never forgotten how. The song changed, mixing old gospel with something smoother, jazzier. It was like she was telling a story without using words, and everyone in that room was listening. Some people sat perfectly still, not wanting to break the spell. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, as if realizing for the first time that this wasn't just background noise or entertainment. This was real, raw, honest. She played with her whole heart, all the pain and joy packed into every note. She remembered, sitting next to her grandmother at church, watching her hands dance over the piano. She remembered sneaking practice time in school after everyone else had gone home. And she remembered putting it all aside when life got too heavy. That dream had been buried, but not gone. By now the man who had made the joke looked lost in his own seat. His drink sat untouched. He kept glancing at his friends, trying to find someone to share a laugh with, but no one met his eyes. For once, he wasn't in control of the moment. A woman near the front quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. She didn't post it right away. She just watched, like everyone else, completely caught up in what was happening. When the final note rang out, the silence afterward felt even louder than the applause that followed. People stood up. Some clapped with tears running down their faces. One man gave a slow, deep clap, like he was honoring something sacred. She opened her eyes, dazed, like waking from a long sleep. A few moments passed before she realized what had just happened. She stood up, smoothed her uniform, and returned to work like nothing had changed. The next morning, she woke up like every other day. The alarm buzzed, the city noise hummed outside her window, and life felt just like it always had. She got ready for work, tied her shoes, and caught the bus downtown. She half believed the piano moment had all been a dream. But when she walked into the restaurant, everything was different. The other waiters smiled at her like they were proud. One cook gave her a thumbs up from behind the counter. The manager, who usually only cared about tips and complaints, actually said, "Good morning," before asking how she was doing. And then she saw it. One of the customers had posted the video online. Not just any customer, the woman near the front who had wiped tears from her eyes. She wrote, "Last night I witnessed something unforgettable. A woman showed us that talent doesn't wear a uniform. It plays from the heart." The post spread fast. By lunchtime, people were coming in just to see if she'd play again. Some asked for her name. Others left bigger tips. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She tried to keep working like normal, but her mind kept going back to that piano. How it had felt. Who she had become in those minutes. It reminded her of who she used to be, and who she could still be. Later that week, a message came through on the restaurant's social media page. A music producer had seen the clip. He asked if she'd ever thought about recording something. She read the message twice, thinking it was a joke, then a third time, just to be sure. She didn't reply right away. She needed a moment to believe she deserved this kind of chance. That night, sitting on her small balcony with the city lights around her, she stared at the sky and whispered to herself, Maybe it's not too late." Something inside her stirred. Not hope exactly, more like quiet courage. The kind that says, you might have started late, but you're not finished yet. She didn't sleep much that night. Her phone kept buzzing with messages she wasn't used to seeing. Some were from strangers saying how her music made them cry. Others were from people who had also been told they weren't good enough and now felt like maybe they were. The message from the music producer still sat in her inbox. She read it again and again, trying to believe it was real. It said something like, "Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard." She thought about everything that had brought her here, growing up poor, helping her family, working long hours just to keep the lights on. She thought about the times she wanted to give up, when playing piano felt like a dream too far out of reach. Now that chance had walked right back into her life, standing quietly in her phone screen like it was waiting for her to say yes. Next time she went to work, someone had printed out the video comments and taped them to the staff board. One said, "You reminded me not to forget what I'm capable of." Another read, "You played like you were fighting for something." She smiled, but inside she was shaking. Not from fear this time. More like excitement she wasn't ready to name yet. That evening, she finally replied to the producer. "Just 3 small words. I'd like to try. A few days later, she found herself walking into a recording studio for the first time. It looked like something out of a movie. Cables everywhere, big headphones, buttons and screens lighting up the room. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and started to play. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was more powerful than anything she could have faked. As the sound filled the studio, she realized something. This wasn't just about proving anyone wrong or getting attention. This was about giving herself permission to do what she always loved, without apology, without hiding. For once, she wasn't the waitress by day and a dreamer by night. She was just an artist. The recording started making rounds online before it was even finished. People were curious. Who was this woman who played from her heart in a restaurant full of strangers? They wanted to know her story, and they wanted more music. Soon, local news picked it up, then bigger blogs. A radio host called it the most powerful performance of the year. But for her, the real moment wasn't about the attention. It was about walking into the studio again, and again, turning those late-night feelings into something real. She recorded songs that came from deep inside. Some she had written years ago, others she made up while sitting at the piano, letting the music guide her. Each one carried a piece of her: life, struggle, hope, pain, joy. One evening, after finishing a track, the producer asked, "Have you ever thought about doing a live show?" She laughed at first. That didn't sound like something for people like her. She was just a regular person trying to make something beautiful out of what she had. But the idea stuck, like a seed planted in soft soil, waiting to grow. Then came the invitations, small shows at local theatres, community events. People bought tickets not because she was famous, but because they felt something when she played. On the night of her first show, she stood behind the curtain, listening to the crowd. Some were there by chance. Others had followed her story from the start. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from knowing how far she had come, from remembering the long bus rides, the tired feet, the quiet dreams tucked away at the back of her mind. When she walked on stage, the applause hit her like a wave. She sat down at the piano, closed her eyes, and let her fingers speak. And as the first note filled the room, she knew. This was where she was meant to be all along, not hiding, not pretending, just playing, for herself, for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't. Months passed, and life looked completely different now. She still remembered the days of waking up early just to catch 2 buses to work. But now, instead of walking into a restaurant, she walked onto stages, big ones, with bright lights, full seats, and cameras flashing. She had gone from being someone no one noticed to someone many couldn't forget. But the funny thing was, she didn't feel like a star, not in the way people imagined. She just felt seen. People came up to her after shows, some with tears in their eyes, others holding shaky voices as they told her how she inspired them. A young girl once handed her a drawing of a woman at a piano saying, "I play too, and now I know I don't have to stop." That meant more than any headline or sold-out concert. She also started getting messages from other workers, janitors, cooks, drivers, who said they used to dream big, but gave up when life got too hard. Her story reminded them that it wasn't too late. Still, not everything was perfect. There were tough days, times when doubt crept in, when she wondered if she really belonged in those fancy studios or on those big stages. But then she would sit at the piano, start playing, and all the doubts would fade. She didn't need anyone's permission anymore. She had already proven to herself what she was capable of. As for the man who first made the joke, he never showed up at any of her shows. Someone said he tried to send another message through a friend, asking if they could talk. She thought about it, but decided not to respond. This wasn't his story. It never was. It was hers. And everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. One night, after a long tour, she sat outside, her small apartment, looking at the city lights. She smiled quietly to herself, not because she had made it, but because she hadn't given up, and that more than anything, made all the difference.